Mic check 1 2, testing 1 2. Mic check 1 2, testing 1 2. It's about 4 seconds already. Okay. Mic check 1 2, testing 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
This budget hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication now reconvenes for the fiscal year 2018 executive budget request. This morning, we are meeting with the University of Guam to discuss their proposal. I just want to preface, let me do this before. Let me recognize who's here. On my right, Senator Regine Bisco Lee, Senator Luis Borja Munoz, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, and Senator Tommy Morrison. To my right, Senator Will Castro, and Senator Joe Snogestein. I want to preface this budget hearing with the uncertainty the government of Guam faces with regards to potential negative impacts to the general fund revenue collections and economic activity as a result of many factors, such as the H-2B visa denials. We hope that this morning's attack in Manila is in fact just a robber, because if it's an if it's a terrorist attack, we're finished. I think the president knows that Washington will use that as the excuse that we will never get another H-2 from there, especially if their last 3 assignments as overseas workers were in any of the Middle Eastern countries. Potential also federal tax reform cuts that may erode Guam's revenue base, caps on Section 30 revenues to be collected. With these issues at the top of our minds, the Guam Legislature has a daunting task of ensuring that we provide funding for the public service of the people of Guam want and need. Just as a brief overview, the executive budget request submitted by the Governor through the Bureau of Budget and Management provides status quo funding for the University of Guam on FY17 authorized levels of around $30.7 million. Aside from the appropriations for general operations and miscellaneous operations provided to the university in the executive budget request was $200,000 less than FY17 authorized. The university is no stranger to cash challenges affecting the entire government of Guam and has had to dig deep into their own reserves to sustain current operations. Today, the university comes before the body with $3.5 million requests above FY17 authorized levels. I would like to elevate the level of discourse at today's hearing to highlight what have the impact of cash shortages had on the university's academic program and the impact on those shortages on other government agencies. The legislature can prioritize funding, but it is the job of the executive branch to carry out and provide the cash based on the appropriation levels authorized. I want to also recognize that I've been joined by Senator Talina Nelson and Senator James Espardo and the Vice Speaker, Therese Derlahi. I want to thank the university officials for being here today. I ask, since the Sergeant at Arms has already sworn you in, you can introduce yourself for the record and begin your presentation.
Good morning, buenos días, dan hafaday todos hamzo, honorable na senador Gimina 34 na legislatura ng Guam. It's an honor and special privilege to present to you the budget request for the University of Guam for the upcoming fiscal year 2018. It is customary in these presentations to use the words need, necessity, shortfalls, fair, balance, and even dire straits. I may use those words this morning, but I prefer to use the words future and growth and unrealized potential in this presentation. It really is a position statement and a plan for the future of the university and the future of Guam and the region. It is not just a series of numbers which we hope add up, but a financial plan for the future growth of an institution this island, the region, needs and deserves if this island is going to face the future with confidence and courage. A budget is a plan. A budget cannot be assessed just in numbers, but whether the plan is consistent with the best ideals of our society, whether it is financially coherent, and whether it demonstrates that the preparers understand who they are and whether the preparers recognize who you are. It is a relationship between your university and the Guam Legislature as the representatives of the people of Guam. The budget that you ultimately approve is a financial statement about the importance that the University of Guam plays in our lives. I'm here this morning to present that plan. But in the same way that a vision is more than just words, numbers are more than just arithmetic. It presents a story about realized potential and unrealized promise. It presents a plan for growth and a flexible but necessary approach to future activity, which will strengthen not just the graduates of the university or the UOG community of scholars, but the islands which sustain the students and the island community. We are an island university. It is our focus. It is your focus. And it is our planning together that will make islanders flourish and islands sustainable as physical entities as well as venues for cultures that are centuries old. We are asking for more money than we were authorized last year. It is tempting to say that we're trying to make up for the obvious reality that the Department of Administration did not give us our full allotments for 2016, and the outlook doesn't look any better for 2017. But the increase we are requesting is only approximately 60% of the allotments that were not given. We're not trying to reverse the past. That past is over. But we are forced to plan for the future and make a request for spending on capital funds and capital equipment that we have traditionally funded in other ways in the past. This plus increments for the staff and faculty, and 2 new positions comprise the entire additional request. And I'd like to go to the slides, the introduction slide. Yeah. So this is the key points about this fiscal year 2018 budget is that we have engaged in a plan called the Great UOG, G2G, How to Become a Great University, and this continues to be the basis for our planning and our implementation and how we try to draw in the issue of resources, academic planning, and community needs. It supports enrollment growth as we near 4,000 students. This growth is driving UOG expansion and costs. It enables UOG to provide accessible education, develop social and economic capacity in our communities, and create change and growth through research innovation. It ensures that anticipated WASC recommendations are met and that we continue to pursue Good to Great or G2G initiatives. Next slide. I want to assure everyone that the Board of Regents supports this. They're actively involved in the process of budget review. Unfortunately, due to the timing of the scheduling of this, no Board of Regents members are here this morning, but I can say with some assurance that they all endorse this. Okay, and I just want to also add that in the latest WASC report, it's very rare to get a commendation on the Board of Regents in any institution, but in the WASC report, special mention was drawn to the fact that the Board of Regents are eagerly involved in the policy making of the university and are avid participants in advocacy. Next slide. Good to Great. This is our statement of greatness. This is who we are as an institution. The University of Guam's unique geographical location and its commitment of expertise to the needs of Guam and the Micronesian region jointly provide the basis for greatness. The university functions as an intellectual conduit for the people and institutions of the region, East Asia, and the world to learn from one another within an American higher ed framework. Greatness consists of leadership and learning, teaching, discovery, and service that preserves the essential strengths of the region's cultures and natural resources and applying those strengths to new challenges in flexible, multiple ways that transform the students of the university's partners, and the university itself. And we analyze every activity, even if it's just facilities management or program in sociology. We have begun the process where we analyze each activity on these 4 criteria. Fit to that mission. So even the carpenter at the University of Guam is supposed to figure out and understand this mission and how their work fits to this. Financial and programmatic sustainability. Each program, each activity is supposed to figure out how they're supposed to get resources. And this is why I engaged and I know some of you senators entertain visits from various members of the administrative team. I took the opportunity. I said, why don't you guys go out and explain the university to the senators? Some people said, well, you're going to lose your message control. I said, well, if it's going to be lost, it's okay with me. I think these people behind me perhaps presented a little bit more insights into the operation of the university. And so I encourage that. So, and the way that universities traditionally work is that academics get together and they decide these are projects that we want to engage in, and these are programs that we want to engage in. And then they say, okay, they go into committees, they vote on it, they approve it, and then after they're done, they turn to the president and say, okay, go find the money for this. And that's not the way we're doing it anymore. We just don't do it that way anymore. Everybody has to be involved in figuring out how to get money, how to get resources. Quality of effort, demand relationships, what is your relationship to the community and the professions that you're supposed to be preparing for. Next slide. So coming out of that good to great framework, we analyzed 5 big issues. Student experience, which have led to a lot of different kinds of activities, connectivity to the world, which, we hired a chief information officer. This was one of the breakthroughs that we underwent. Changing human resource portfolio. I'll touch a little bit on that, how people are hired and how people are hired quickly and what kind of changes that the university is undergoing. Our financial sustainability, which continues to be a big concern, and big data, how big data supports not only our administrative procedures, but also our research agenda. Next slide. So we have what we call the hedgehog model. And this is that we're trying to get people to understand that what do you really care about? What does the university really care about? And these are the things that it really cares about that are listed there. And then what is it that we could be good at that nobody else could be good at? What else that the university is uniquely positioned to be able to do things? So when we match those two things, and then we have to say, what drives your resource engine? So you ask a faculty group, let's say you ask 3 professors in chemistry, okay? So what drives how do we know that what we're spending on 3 chemistry professors is worth the effort? So they have to come up with an answer. And so sometimes it's in students, sometimes it goes out and they get research grants themselves. There's all different ways to analyze that. But the heat and the pressure is on, and I have to say that most people eagerly accept it. Next slide. So here's our challenges. We are revising and strengthening the student experience, outreach to high schools and community colleges. We're hiring kind of ambassadors in there, and we've changed our GE requirements, so now we're in the process of negotiating very clear lines of transfer with community colleges. We reinstituted student athletics, which is part of the student experience, which has come off to a great success. Improved the human resource portfolio, experiment with new staff and faculty portfolios. This is an issue, of course, that touches on institutional autonomy, and it may involve legislation in the future. Exponentially grow the connectivity of the university. We anticipate having 5,000 students online by the year 2025, as well as 5,000 students on campus. Understand financial sustainability in all programs, activities, and service. That's a really tough issue to learn. As I said, that's just not, academics don't normally look at the world that way. And improve and revise administrative and assessment processes to include the use of big data. Now, of course, our unpredictable allotments contributes to the delays in addressing these issues. So we had a plan, we make money, we save the money, we apply it to the new initiatives. When we don't get the allotments, we have to take that money and we have to pay for basic services. And sometimes if we don't get the money in a timely way, we have to delay our payments. So that puts us in a little bit of jeopardy with vendors. For the first time in a long time, we had to go to 90 days with some vendors. But we had a good year in spite of all that. We conferred 608 degrees. We received national recognition for various programs. We relaunched Triton Athletics and UOG Press, which is an outlet for local writers and scholars. We enhanced our regional, national, and international partnerships. I just returned from Manila, fortunately, before the incident near the airport. Signed an agreement with Mapua University to continue our engineering relationship. The senior vice president went to Korea and signed an agreement with 4 island universities, Island Universities, Ryukyu, Jeju University, and another one in Indonesia. We've experienced growth in research and service opportunities. We obtained low-risk oddity status for 2015 and 2016, and the Student Center and Engineering Annex groundbreaking is imminent. We've issued the RFPs. We're in the process of negotiation. I'm glad to report that there's been no challenges to our procurement. So, our enrollment and credit hour, next slide. Our enrollment and credit hours. So, this is the trajectory on credit hours, which is really is both a revenue estimate and also tells you how serious students are in trying to finish their degree. And we've kind of topped off, and this is consistent with national trends, which show about a 2% drop-off for the past 3 years in college education. And of course, there's been a leveling also of high school graduation on Guam. So we're trying to figure out still how to deal with that. Our graduation growth has continued to grow. So that means, like this past year, we see the number of degrees, 118 graduate and 490 undergraduate. What that means is that even though the enrollment has leveled, our graduation rates are increasing, is that students are more serious. We're giving them more counseling. We're trying to enhance their student experience to stay in and complete the degree. For our common understanding, universities and colleges are assessed by accrediting agencies on their graduation rate. That's a very basic rate. So when people say, oh, go to UOG for 1 or 2 years and go somewhere else, I tell them, no, that's a bad idea. Go to UOG until you get a degree. Because what happens is that's when it actually makes a difference in our accreditation. The idea of the national average, is about 55-60%. The students who attempt a degree actually get one. Ours is around 30%. So we have a ways to go. But it used to be 25%. So we're working on that. And this degree completion here is reflective of that. Next slide. Our university challenges are 2016 audited, reflected a $4 million decrease in their net position. This might be questioned by accreditors. We also were shorted in allotments over $5 million, a little over $5 million. We are in discussion about a $2 million payment, which we're trying to credit back to 2016, but came pretty late, so it's pretty hard to do that. Recent government cash shortfalls have contributed to delays, as I mentioned, in executing G2G. We had to exhaust our university funds for G2G projects in order to cover operational costs. And while financial reports continue to show that UOG lives within its means, unpredictable budget allotments impede university planning. So for us, the planning stability is key, because you have to rely on that regular allotment schedule in order to demonstrate that. And so this is a short, next slide. This is just a shorthand way of explaining what happened. This is fiscal year 2015. We got the appropriation, we got what we received, and we had this capital equipment and capital reserve fund. That's what we use from money that we make through indirect costs, through all kinds of projects that we get. We use that funding in order to support university initiatives and our basic, facility improvements. So that totals almost $5 million. Last year, the fiscal year, that's what we got in appropriation, that's what we got in receipts, and you can see the CER and CFR gone, because we had to use that in order to make up the difference. So we're really, did I say I wasn't going to use the word bare bones? But I might in this instance. We're really down to it. Okay, our fiscal year 2018 appropriation request, our general ops, $33.8 million, and I'll explain this in the increase is $3.1 million to address personnel needs for academic programs, basically 2 new positions, and also $1 million in increments approximately, and deferred capital project allotments due to allotment shortages in fiscal year 16. We also have a moderate increase in student financial aid program. I'll explain that in a little bit of detail. I just want to thank the legislature for giving us the opportunity to be flexible with student financial aid. It has resulted in a really great use of financial resources, encouraging growth in various programs. And then we just have the special, basically pass-through appropriations for Weary and Hatchery. Next slide. So this is the list of capital and deferred maintenance projects. It's over $4 million. And this is a cumulative exercise. So had we had the appropriate allotments last year, we wouldn't have this list. So we're not trying to recover the whole list. We're just trying to cover about half of it and trying to find a way to and we just listed for examples all of the projects that we have. Next slide. General op expenses, personnel. I've already explained a 1.29 million variance. Contracts, it's a little bit increase, primarily due to the fact that we anticipate having 2 new buildings, which even though they're going to be hopefully LEED certified, will still cost us a little bit more in power. Supplies and equipment, basically investment in safety solutions, and then preventive and deferred maintenance. And so that results in a $3.38 million request. Well, it's actually 3.1, but this 3.38, part of it will be met by tuition. Okay, next slide. General operations revenue. This is just a comparison between what we requested, what was reapportioned, and fiscal 18 requests. And so this is, basically we're looking at tuition revenue, slight decrease, federal matching funds, still approximately about the same. Our revenue generation is still about the same, and the appropriation request is an increase. Next slide. I think this is really the key, and I'm so glad you mentioned this, Speaker Cruz. I think part of it is the key to understanding how the university helps the community. The University of Guam returns $1.75 in community benefit for every dollar it receives. UOG faculty and administrators obtain approximately $15 million annually in federal research and grant funding. Some of our most successful program managers are here today, including Cedars and other areas. In fiscal year 2016, UOG employed 897 full and part-time employees, of which 398 were locally funded, and the balance were funded through federal and other sources. So that's a payroll of almost 500 that we've generated through our own activity. The financial impact on that is great, and the only way we're able to generate that level of payroll and generate those research activities which sustain that is to be able to fully fund our general ops so that our regular faculty can be creative and our administrators can help generate a research agenda and a service agenda that really fits the needs of the island communities. That's how we see it. Another example in PIP program is UOG conducts ESL training for Asian students, and we make about $360,000 a year to reduce budget requests. The University of Guam, I think last year, brought in 7,000 students. We have more students coming in from Asia through this short-term program than we have on campus. And I always tell Guam Visitors Bureau, I don't know why we're not getting an award for this, because we're really promoters of educational tourism. And more importantly, we're training those young people how to be tourists when they get older and have money to go on vacation. They know where to go. And that could increase, that number could increase based on, a little bit of flexibility to allow us to go into a private-public partnership on a self-sustaining basis to build dorms, which will allow us to grow our international student and allow us to accommodate even more students. Okay, this is a comparison between the year 2000 and the year 2016, just to understand that the University of Guam is becoming less dependent on GovGuam appropriations. So you can see there it was about 51% in the year 2000. In fiscal year 2016, it was 43%. You can see that in the slice there on the federal grants were going up. We actually even go up more dramatically because this doesn't reflect some recent activities that we've gotten with EPSCOR, which is a huge grant, $7 million over 5 years. And then we also, the reliance on tuition for our total portfolio is approximately the same. Next slide. I want to make sure that the next slide. All right, government appropriation comparison. I want to make sure that people understand the context in which this slide is given. In the year 2000, you can see this is the audited amounts. Guam Department of Education received $166 million. GCC received $12.8 million. UOG received $29.2 million. Audited results for 2016, GDOE received $254 million. GCC received $18 million, and UOG received $26 million. So if you just look at those audited amounts, you can see that during that time period from 2001 to 2016, GDOE went up by 54%, GCC went up by 40%, and UOG went down by 11%. Now, we're not crying about that. We just want you to know that if we get our regular funding, we won't ask for much more. That's all we're asking for. I use this slide not to whine that GCC has grown or GDOE has grown. I'm just trying to convey the message that if we got our regular allotments, we would even have more growth. It's like looking at it as an investment. If we had grown proportionately even to that growth, we should be up at 35 million or 40 million. We're not asking for that because we're not trying to make that kind of comparison, but we just want you to understand how the lay of the land works for the university. The university understands that it has a responsibility to be financially sustainable and prudent, and we're trying to do that. And I think I want to make sure people, you senators, understand that. The basic compact. This is our compact with students because tuition is always kind of thrown around a lot. So our basic compact is to try to make it 50-50. The GovGuam appropriation pays for about 50% of instructional costs, and the student is responsible for the 50%. So UOG has historically received the majority of its operational funding from GovGuam. Current total cost, instructional cost per FTE, is about $10,700. GovGuam usually supports 50%, tuition supports 50%. Enrollment increases, obviously, are going to require greater GovGuam support. Now, for the student who's responsible for the other 50%, between the Student Financial Aid Program, Pell Grants, and federal loans, they make up a significant portion of tuition costs. So, in reality, even though they're responsible for only half of what it costs to educate them, very few students are actually paying that out of pocket because you have all of these grants and activities. So we could calculate that, but I'm estimating that, if you just average it out amongst all students, that the average student out of pocket may be paying 10% or 20% of the actual tuition if you spread out the cost. Now, tuition at the University of Guam currently is about at the 30th percentile of all four-year institutions, meaning 70% of four-year institutions charge more than UOG. So even given this, and this is our commitment, it's 50-50. You give us your commitment, and we'll give you the services in exchange. And in fact, just on the four-year institutions, only two entities charge less tuition than UOG, Wyoming and Puerto Rico. Every other state has tuition that's higher than UOG, including the Virgin Islands. Okay, and the next slide is, it pays to get a college degree. So even all of this, given and just to kind of convey the message again, I try to tell this to airlines, I try to tell this to auto dealerships, I try to tell it to people involved in the economy. You want a middle class. You want a professional middle class. That professional middle class for this island is created at the University of Guam. You want to sell cars, you want people to buy cars who can afford them. You want people to travel, you need a middle class. So this is the general trajectory of what it means to get a four-year degree versus what it means to stay out of just get a high school diploma or a two-year degree. The Georgetown University does the best studies on labor prediction, workforce prediction for the entire nation. They predict that by the year 2019, two-thirds of all the available jobs will require some college. So if you're graduating from high school in 2019, and that's all you're going to the workforce with, you're only going to be qualifying for about one-third of the available jobs. So you need to go to college. You need to get some training. You need to go to college if you're going to have a chance at the nature of the economy. That's why the college access fund is critical. It's to give people that opportunity to understand that. If you don't go to college, your chances of getting a job are 1 out of 3. You're only eligible for one-third of the jobs, the anticipated jobs. So that's the reality that is confronting our students. How many of our students from high school actually go to college? We're trying to, coordinate that. We've been trying to do annual statistics. We finally were able to insert ourselves into the 12th grade exit survey this year at GDOE. We're estimating 25%, maybe 30%. But if only 25% are going on to college, that's 75% that only have a high school diploma, not to count all the people who dropped out of high school, are going to be looking at job opportunities in the next decade that are going to be pretty dismal. That's why this is an investment. That's why this is the investment in UOG and the investment in GCC and the requirement to coordinate. And the requirement to coordinate with DOE is so critical. because that's the future economy. And for us, of course, it's always about the creation of the professional class, the middle class for Guam. And my conclusion is that the university is a great investment, and we ask for the continuing commitment of the people of Guam through you, through their elected representatives, to ensure growth for the entire community. Reiterate again, to become a great UOG, stable and predictable allotments for base operations is necessary. The university has to be understood as an economic engine, an enabler, as well as preserver of culture and advancement of intellectual development. It's more than just a place where people get a degree. This is your center. This is your, you're going to require studies in the future. You ought to look to the university. This is the enabler for those studies, for intellectual development. And I believe that the university has proven to be good stewards of the funding provided us and has grown because of it. We wish to thank the Guam Legislature and the people of Guam for supporting these accomplishments. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, President Underwood, for that presentation. I think the entire panel understands the importance of the investment, which is the reason why we have tried as much as possible to provide your requests. Though you make the appeal to us, now I'm wondering whether or not it's your students that are teaching the civics classes out there that don't understand that we can only appropriate from here. That the whining and the voices should be heard at Adelup and at ITC building. Yesterday, I chastised DOE about that and the fact that we're constantly under criticism about the fact that we don't support education. And I want to make that clear, especially to the public, that we're taking their money and investing it in education. And yesterday we found out that DOE was shorted $5.1 million last year, or over $5 million. And your most recent audit, maybe I'll just get you to answer it so that the public can understand that we've appropriated from here, but we can't release the cash to you. And in your audit, and this year, how much have you been shorted as of today for last year's appropriation?
Now, as of today, it's actually over $5 million for 2016, and we're right now. We received a payment yesterday. As of right now, we're at about 19 million, 19.5 million to go for fiscal year, this fiscal year. In order to make sure that we get every allotment, we calculate that they'd have to give us $1.2 million a week for the remaining 16 weeks of this fiscal year. They've made a commitment to $600,000 a week, so it would have to double up just to get us to where the appropriation that you generously gave us last year would be met for.
And that was my comment yesterday to DOE when I asked them how much their weekly allotment was, trying to figure out what DI math would get them to the 242, or your 600,000.
That's right.
Would get the 19 million still owed.
That's right. Even as it stands today, So we got $500,000 yesterday, maybe in anticipation of this hearing. Maybe we had a hearing every day. For the next 3 weeks, we might catch up. But the issue for us is, of course, is that I took Math 085, so I can kind of figure out what the balance is and get to that. Of course, we're trying to figure out how to be collaborative. We use that term collaborative a lot. We're not trying to throw anybody under the bus or make a big public fuss out of anything. But if I can tell you this, that if we're facing the same situation in August or September that we faced last August or September, we're going to have to anticipate a different level of activity, not only from the university, but I think from maybe the entire university community, because this is not a sustainable way to deal with your institution, your capstone institution of education on the island.
And that's why that's what I'm trying to get to, is that it's got to be more than me and a couple of people up here screaming about the fact that you're not getting your money. You came today with a room full of people.
I'll get them ready.
And I attended commencement this year, one of the best commencement speakers I'd heard ever. And his message to everybody was, you cannot be silent.
That's right.
Your voices have to be heard. And though he was more eloquent than I was in my 2 commencement speeches at the university about encouraging civil disobedience in the 80s, I just don't understand why there isn't any movement by the students or by the faculty or your
I hear you.
34 administrators that make up more than 10% of the budget.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out. In one of my commencement speeches to the university, my first one, I told them my first act of civil disobedience was sitting in at the president's office because of something that was happening in the dining room at the college that I was at. I see no action from the university students. Are they aware of the problems that you're having?
I think some are. Of course, some are just kind of focused on their individual programs. But I think they will become more aware as time goes on. I certainly hear your message loud and clear. But also, as we consider other options, because we have to calculate what are possibilities that we can engage in. Of course, another increase in tuition. That's always out there. That's a great motivator for students. And we've used that in the past to actually get an allotment release about 3 years ago. So, we're trying to calculate that. But I certainly hear your message loud and clear. And we're not going to go down the same road that we did last year without a little bit more activity than you saw last year.
Yes, but I hope not. I mean, especially as much as you're shorted now. It just really is unconscionable that they're very comfortable behind you, but they have to be heard. What was the impact of, you talked about how it affected those $4 million, $3.5 million programs. Has anybody spoken to anybody but the presentation here about that impact to the university?
Yes. We continually tell them what the effect is, but most of it is, internal for us, because we're having to defer projects in grant growth and faculty development and administrator and leadership development. We've had to defer all of these projects just to meet basic operations. And then we had to slow down spending enormously. We kind of hinted that we may have to have a foregoing of increments. We've done all those things internally. But I would have to say that you're right, Mr. Speaker. To some extent, we've suffered in silence. Now, just to understand the way that the university has historically dealt with this, is that they would, DOA would always tell us, don't worry, you'll get it in the end. All right. Well, we got it in a different end this time. But in previous times, the end that we got was that they would make up the payments in after the fiscal year, and usually before December. So that generally made us whole. Last year was the first year that they didn't do this. And so they've used the argument that, somehow or other paying of prior obligations is the villain in this, when it's actually the short of allotment, the failure to pay allotments on time. And so that's why I say that this year is going to be, the reaction will be a little bit different because, for the past, I would say, since I've been president, most of the time we were a little short at the end of the year, and then they would make it up by December, and then we would be made whole. And it's okay because it kind of coincides with our academic year and our spending processes. But this year, last year, because of the shortage, we can't go down this road again, and we're not going to.
You complimented the legislature about the flexibility that we gave you with student financial aid. How was that impacted by the shortage?
The shortage? What they do is they always make sure that financial aid is paid because there's people complaining. So normally we're okay on student financial aid. But again, there's a few hiccups in the processes, so we've had to slow down some payments in that regard. But what we've been able to do, it's a kind of a success story. We've hired a bursar, and then we hired people to go out and collect money. So for the past 5-6 years, we've collected a lot of money. And we use that money that we collect from people who haven't paid, or most of them are just people who live in the States and never bothered coming back. And they find out that when they want to get a home loan that their credit is shot because we've made a complaint about them, then they will decide to pay. So we've been able to go through that process, and I think in the early years we collected as much as $500,000. Some years 700,000. We're now down to about 300,000. There's only so many people left. And in fact, a prominent doctor told me yesterday that he just got a collection letter from us. So that's been how we've handled student financial aid. But going forward, we don't have those. We don't have that reliance anymore. So we've asked for a little bump up.
And so are the rumors true that there are new policies that are being implemented by the university that are going to affect new financial aid, new scholarships, new assistance to the students?
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have we devoted about $48,000 to athletic scholarships, which is about $500 or $1,000 per student, in order to encourage them to go to UOG. So that's we have that scholarship. We have what we've done with the internally with the nursing scholarship and the educator scholarship is we've done what every other university does, which is we top it off based on if you have financial aid, federal financial aid, that comes in first, and then we make up the balance. So that's going to give us a little bit of wiggle room, probably about $200,000 or $300,000. That's basically the main changes. We did as a...
Is there going to be any discontinuance of any programs?
No.
I'm hearing that there might be a movement to stop certain programs
No.
for
No,
scholarships.
That's not true. I don't know what if you let me know what programs, I can...
ProTech?
No, not at all. In fact, last year we gave $1.2 million in ProTech.
Okay. Now, I'm just trying, because I was trying to confirm the rumors that I was hearing and phone calls that I keep getting about my child's tuition. I'm being told they have to leave or something.
And also, just so you know, we've also, we're also part of the Western WICHE, which is now going to offer us the opportunity, which is the part of WICHE I like. I don't like all of it, but the part I like is that we're able to establish relationships for graduate and professional programs like veterinary medicine, and optometry, and physical therapy, so that we can get our students in there at 150% tuition.
How much did you have to borrow from your internal cash to make up for the shortfall?
All of it. $5 million.
And I just, I'm just trying to get the listening audience, and especially my colleagues, to understand that last year we provided.
That's right.
And the listening audience should also understand we gave the appropriation, and that the shortage that that you're not whining about today is a shortage that was not from this body, or at least anything that we could control.
And you're absolutely correct, Mr. Speaker, and that was the purpose of the slide, to show that even though the university did not get the increase in revenue or appropriations and audited amounts, allotments, that other educational institutions received, we're not trying to seek a parity in growth. We're just trying to get what you agreed to give us. And so the burden is not on, I don't think it's anyone who sees that the legislature is at the fault of this. I would certainly beg to differ with anyone who says that.
You may not, but there are morning talk shows and afternoon talk shows that go on and on with people complaining about the legislature not giving or not supporting education. And I'm trying to figure out what civics class they went to, and hoping that it wasn't out of your government division,
I hope not.
department, that they're running around with this misimpression.
Well, as you well know, being in the legislature is not being the most popular in the world. I think I wrote a column about that.
How has the shortage impacted your academic programs?
And what it does is it defers hiring, so that we then have to rely on more adjunct faculty. And then when we rely on adjunct faculty, there's obviously a kind of a drop-off on quality, because full-time faculty will be able to be there for advisement, and they do service activities, and they get involved in more committee work. So that's primarily the burden on it. And in some respects, I have to say that in some respects we've used this as an opportunity to kind of recast our programs, but we're not pulling away from any growth programs that we have articulated a need for, like most notably School of Engineering. We think that's a growing issue. The faculty hire that we've requested is basically a physics position, which is connected to the School of Engineering. And so that's, it hasn't, let me put it to you this way. For every full-time tenure-track faculty member that is required to conduct service and research, the burden is on that individual to then go out and engage in research projects and secure funding for that. When you just hire adjuncts to cover those classes, you're really foregoing that growth. And so it's not just that, can you get along? Yeah, you can get along with adjuncts, but that's not the point. The point is that you're not getting a faculty member that's engaged in service activities. Every full-time faculty member on tenure track is supposed to be engaged in university service and community service, and they're supposed to document that. They have a comprehensive faculty evaluation system, CFES, where they have to list that. And they have to list their research projects. And they have to demonstrate that they're, securing support for that. When we are unable to hire those faculty, then we're unable to have the leveraging effect, which I referred to earlier. That's the unrealized potential of saying, oh, well, you can just cover those courses with adjunct faculty. We could, but we're more than just a teaching institution. We're involved in community service and community engagement and research.
A couple of weeks ago, I had a hearing with Guam Memorial Hospital, and I was shocked to hear that they're short of over 100 nurses. How is the nursing program going? I noted a drop in the number of graduates.
Yeah.
And what does that account for? Why was
Well,
that?
I think, we analyze these, the nursing in terms of cohorts, and I have to say that this particular cohort was not very successful, and I think the nursing faculty have indicated that to me, that, some of them dropped out or they decided nursing was not for them. The next cohort next year will be will equal the largest number of graduates, which will be up to 36 next year. We are trying, we also adopted last year, holistic scoring for admissions into the nursing program, so that successful LPNs coming out of GCC can enter our program, so that we are now trying to increase the number of cohorts in that way. And it was partially in response to, of course, the concerns that have been expressed by GMH and GRMC. I'm happy to report, I was at GRMC yesterday. There's 15 nurses there that came out of UOG. 11 were hired last year, and then 10 were hired by GMH. And so we're trying to arrange, in order to maintain your accreditation as a nursing program, you have to give them clinical experience in public health and pediatrics. It's hard to give a cohort of 40 students sufficient clinical experience in public health nursing when there are only 9 public health nurses. So, there's a little bit of scrambling in order to kind of compensate for that. So even if we anticipate a growth to a cohort of 50 nurses over time, which would take us, 3 to 5 years to reach, those 50 nurses that will graduate will actually be absorbed by the community for a couple of years, and then after that we'd be kind of oversold. So it's kind of a balance. I'm not saying that 100 vacancies are good, but I'm just saying that right now we had particularly not the best cohort that we've had in a long time. But I would say for this cohort, we graduated 2 Chuukese nurses, which is really who are probably going to stay on island and provide service, which is really going to, I think, kind of reshape health service and health care on the island.
Are there any other problems in that program that we could assist with?
No, we're changing it to the School of Health. I think we're going to change it from School of Nursing and Health Services to just School of Health. The public health component is growing, so that the activities that are associated with cancer research and other activities that are related to that are kind of tied to public health, because the notion of just nursing and health service is kind of growing, and so we're trying to figure out how to respond to that. I think the amount for financial aid is adequate. Anyone who's in that program gets a stipend, and they get their tuition support as well.
What's the relationship of GCC to your nursing program, GCC's nursing program to yours?
Well, if they graduate and they successfully pass the LPN, then they're admissible. And that's part of the holistic scoring I was discussing. But, you know, not all of them, even though they graduate from there, they don't necessarily get their LPN, which makes them fall into a different category. I'm not sure, you know, so you have to kind of guard on the basis of passing the professional exams. So for us, the good news on the last year's cohort was that 100% passed the NCLEX. The year before it was 81%. So then you'd have to ask GCC what percentage of their graduates actually pass the LPN test. And so if they pass the LPN test, then they're admissible directly into our program.
And when they get admitted to your program, how many of their credits from GCC can transfer over?
Well, there's usually there's a couple of courses, but I don't know that the burden is so onerous as it used to be, and of course there's close cooperation.
Well, I would hope so. I'm just trying to figure
Sure.
out, because the word that I'm getting is that they're having to do the whole program all over again. And that cost, I thought we had many years ago finally worked out the relationship with GCC to have some of their course credits recognized by the university towards their graduation.
I just want to make sure that I'm characterizing this accurately. The LPN program is designed for LPNs, so they have a different set of courses. The basic general ed will all be transferable. And so then you might have a couple of courses that they're not able to take at GCC, which they'll have to retake at UOG. And that's basically how I understand it. Of course, articulating that program is that if you started out wanting to be an LPN, and then you decided that you wanted to be an RN, then of course you should have decided to be an RN to begin with, and you'd have been taken a different set of courses. And so now, in order to partially deal with that, we then went into what I referred to as holistic scoring, which is not just reliance on an entrance exam, but whether you successfully completed the LPN. And if you did, then you become admissible into the RN program.
I noted in your presentation that you talked about connectivity and online, and you're talking about 5,000. Can you tell? I'm sorry.
No, Mr. Speaker,
I noted in your presentation you talked about connectivity and the fact that you fired a MIS person. Exactly what's happening with that program? I mean, what are we planning on doing with that individual to improve, get good to great?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the connectivity issue, and maybe if you can go to that slide, the slide on Gorex. Where is our slide, man? She may not be hearing. No, she may have it. It's right there. anyways, let me try to. The Chief Information Officer was designed in order to kind of upgrade the whole IT infrastructure at the university. And it does three things. One is that we're obviously interested in trying to use big data for administrative and academic management so that we're able to track students, we're able to give them appropriate advice, we're able to see the statistics ourselves on a real-time basis. So that's part of it. The other part is a research network. Now this was basically the Guam Open Research and Education Exchange. This was basically outlined to me I'd say about 5 years ago by a friend of mine at UH, David Lassner, who's now the president of the University of Hawaii, and he's the one who told me that Guam is more connected than Hawaii and will be in the future. So what we're trying to figure out is how to take advantage of this in terms of educational research so that we don't have to send our data off island. We can process it here. We can become a research network on our own. And so the primary focus has been to utilize this opportunity. So we're negotiating with, the local carriers and the people who are managing these undersea cables in order to ensure that the university has space there so that we have access to the fiber optics, and that we're able to transmit data out and we're able to secure data in quickly to the advantage of researchers. The online university portfolio is partially driven by, academic program interests. So right now we have some programs we have a reading program that's fully online, and we are putting on a business program that's fully online at the graduate level. And we have, about 50 courses now that we offer online, and almost all courses now have a component where part of it is a kind of a hybrid mix.
Those are courses that are being taught by university professors.
That's right.
And the university has been a leader in distance learning throughout Micronesia for the last 4 decades, if memory serves me right. My question is, with that connectivity that you showed and your apprehension about hiring too many faculty at the nursing school or the health department, School of Health, is there a way that you could have adjunct professors from Mayo and Johns Hopkins teaching classes? You don't have to put them on full-time at your faculty, but at least for right now, and if you don't want to have them full-time, then just have short contracts with them to assist in trying to up the number and improve the courses that, the availability of the courses. How many courses are being taught by off-island or?
Yeah. There are some, but there are not many. And of course, we're trying to, that's part of our trying to figure out what kind of contracting we can do for that. But, you're right on that score. We're almost, but I want to say that, almost all, the way we do faculty hiring now is that all faculty that are, especially new faculty, have to have some experience with distance ed. And so we're increasingly expecting them to do more distance ed courses, and they in turn utilize their colleagues from other institutions to assist them. But hiring them specifically for distance ed courses is an area that we haven't explored fully. But it makes sense. If we're going to grow to 5,000, obviously, by 2025, Obviously we have to do something along those lines.
But I was just trying to figure out, I mean, not only in the School of Nursing, but in the accounting school, department, with the very generous $1 million grant that was provided by the accounting, could we utilize that? I mean, you may not want to build up the School of Accounting here, but at least so that students can take courses and be able to start. As I understand it, part of the problem with a lot of the students not graduating is that with not being able to take courses
At a
4 years in
convenient-
a row,
right.
they can't afford to sit around and wait until a course comes back up again. Can that be somehow bridged by,
Yeah, I think it
I mean, short term? I mean, I understand that there's some pushback in the faculty and your rules about the fact that you want, and I understand having them full-time and wanting to, but it just seems to me that some of it can be done by bringing in adjunct professors with your connectivity that you have.
CIO, yes. Yes, I think we can do that. I think we will do that.
Okay, I hope to see that soon. My vice chair's not here, so who's Senator Augustine, Oversight Chair of Education? Yep.
Okay. Thank you for that conversation, Mr. Speaker.
You know, Dr. Underwood, Mr. President, you know, I've spoken to you, I've spoken to most of your staff, and I'd like to find a way how we can find you money. It's quite evident that the University of Guam supports all the activities here in Guam, especially the tourism area. Maybe downtown will help out by saying, if I was to introduce something where we take some money from the hotel industry, maybe they'll wake up and give you your allotments faster so that we don't touch them. Maybe that might spike the movement downtown. Would you think so, Mr. President?
I think so. I think so.
Because I know for a fact that you are receiving funds from the liquid fuel tax. You're receiving about $500,000, am I correct? And GC is also receiving $250,000, but gosh, I just don't believe how in the years DOE and GC has increased, but UOG hasn't. And UOG's at the top of the totem pole. You know, at the end of the day, when you're done at DOE and you go to GC, you end up at UOG. And exactly
That's what we hope.
Well, I look at it this way, Mr. President, is that example at the Department of Revenue and Tax, there's a big portion of employees there that you must have a bachelor's degree to get employed there. And in the police department, a lot of them are focusing on that if you got a bachelor's degree, you can move up the rank a lot faster. So there's got to be a way where we can find new funding, and I know some of my colleagues are saying, don't touch the liquid fuel tax, don't touch the hotel industry, but we got to find a way to find a source of funding that can be kind of like restricted from even the administration touching it. That if it's collected, it just goes to UOG. It's like the streetlight fund, like it's supposed to work, right? But it's obvious we don't have enough streetlights, or the recycling fund that doesn't really pay for Luzon. There's got to be a mechanism, and you know, Mr. President, I'm a graduate of UOG, and I support UOG 100%. I like to see UOG succeed, not just struggle to get by. In the past 5 months, we've spoken, and every time we speak, I call downtown, you call downtown, and then you get a message. We got 500,000, we got $1 million. That's not the way to do business. And you shouldn't be struggling, because at the end of the day, the people of Guam and everybody else around the island starts to struggle. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Half a day,
Half a
everybody. Thank you, Mr. President. And I just had a couple questions. When you said that there was that you were short $5 million for 2016, and it doesn't look like you're going to get that at this point, or is that the current shortage for 2016?
No, we have to eat it.
Okay, and for
You ate it.
for 2017, you're tracking. Well, according to your appropriations, your 19.5 million is still pending, but they've committed only 600,000 per week.
That's the general understanding.
Okay, can you just give me the total? What does that amount to? What are you looking at your shortage? If we only get the 600, what is the total
So
shortage?
in order to, because they always, sometimes they talk about prior obligations as if it was some kind of evil mechanism, that the legislature has provided for them to do catch-up payments. If they wanted to avoid prior obligations and meet this year's appropriation, they would have to give us 1.18 million a week.
Right.
But instead, the general understanding is that they're going to give us 600,000 a week. So we'd still end up on the short end at the end of the fiscal year.
By how much?
Well,
By
it would
10
be
million.
about half of that. It would be around 9 million, 9.5 million. It would end up, and historically, going back several years, that it's always been like that. Between 8 million some years, 9 million some years, but it was made up in October, November, and December. But it didn't happen last year, and
They've made it pretty clear to us also that they don't think they can exceed or pay up that 5 million for the 2016 and yeah. Okay, so what about how does in the last audit they have something here that says for 12 of the last 14 years UOG was averaging a surplus of 3 million. It looks like is that what you used to counteract the shortfall?
well, yeah, because it's the audit is combined, so we're obviously making money through indirect costs. We have special activities, so that's the funding we use to carry out initiatives. That's what I mean when I say, like, if you give us $1, we'll turn it around, and then we'll use that as the opportunity to help grow the university. And behind me are a bunch of people who work hard at that. But what happens when we got the shortfalls last year is we had to eat it all up. And so then we're not able to do the capital, buy capital equipment or do capital facilities to the extent that we had in the past. And we had to do some, so we did only emergency repairs. But more importantly, it just takes the edge off of future planning. So we sat down and we tried to carry out an initiative like the speaker suggested. What do we need to do in order to hire faculty, distance ed faculty? What are the parameters for that? We'd have to engage in a few studies. We'd have to kind of change the rules and regulations, and this takes time and effort. But when all you're doing is trying to catch up to your regular payments, even a happy guy like me can get sour once in a while.
Also, so according to your testimony, the University of Guam is one of the most affordable universities in the nation, and it's also, and then you showed the chart about employability or salary levels, I guess, after graduating from university versus not. Yet, the statistics are showing that only 25% of the high school grads are attending
That's right.
any university or the University of Guam. And if that were to increase, like if you get a bigger percentage of the high school grads, does that increase in revenue from tuition? Could we push for that instead? And would that help? Are there other ways that we could push that and as a source of revenue? And,
Well, that's why we use the slide, the 50-50 bargain.
Right.
So we expect the student to pay for about 50% of the instructional costs, but the government of Guam to pay the other 50%. So let's say we had an increase of 100 students, we'd get that much more revenue for them. But the actual cost of educating that student is actually double the tuition. So it would increase the burden.
That's what I really wanted to confirm, is
Right.
that, so it's your position that to increase the number of students by 100 would, or by percentage would correlate to an absolute
right.
increase in the requirements for Guam
That's
revenues?
right. It will. But then hopefully they become members of the professional middle class and they pay taxes and you get it back. It's supposed to work that way.
So, I mean, we would need more space. We would need more faculty to teach the additional classes, and so those are what's driving the costs. And in our basic model, half of that comes from tuition, and half of that has to be subsidized. So that's why, as the number of students increases,
Yeah,
our requirement for appropriation increases.
So there's no room right now under the current structure, the current faculty that you have to increase enrollment without
No, I mean
increasing
we can deal with moderate increases, but if you're talking about, like, you know, we want to grow by 500 students over the next few years, you'd have to figure out that this is going to cost us more. Then we have to, you know, so the money that you invest in facilities or supporting facilities, the money that is invested in hiring new faculty, depending on the kind of faculty you need. So it's not a straight line correlation, you know, like we had 50 more students next year than we did this year, therefore we need, you know, X amount of dollars. But it's just the kind of I think that 50-50 compact really kind of encapsulates what that relationship should be, and it's something that, you know, because there's a lot of conversation about free tuition. New York recently adopted a free tuition model, and you know, inevitably people are going to raise this issue about how are you going to how is the government of Guam going to respond to that? But right now, our basic compact is 50-50.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hafaday, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hafaday, Mr. President, and the UOG staff and
Okay.
faculty. Thank you for coming. Seen some of you that were my teachers in the past, so thank you very much for your constant encouragement and patience with me. I'm most curious about the Guam Open Research and Education Exchange. Can we elaborate a little bit on the, I see that it is funded in certain areas, the underwater cable, the underwater fiber coming in and out of Guam. When is that due to be implemented, or?
Well, we have some of that is through our relationship with the University of Hawaii and through relationship with the institutions in California. So some University of Hawaii already has space on that. So they're going to give us free space for a few years, so that we're going to be able to increase by tenfold our capacity to move data through that process. But inevitably, this is something that you know, people in the legislature or other legislative bodies are going to have to consider, which is the regulatory regime for how rates are assessed in this, how it fits. You know, I've tried to get smart on this. It's really not the same thing as FCC. We're unsure who regulates undersea cables. It's a State Department function. There's all kinds of elements to it. But a portion of that is devoted to research education networks. That's the part that we're focusing in on, so that it grows our research capacity, and it also grows our capacity to do distance ed.
And how large is the bandwidth on these fiber lines?
We're looking for 10 gigabytes right now, and the ability to grow to 100 gigabytes per second.
Could I?
Yeah,
Okay,
could
so-
you just answer that?
So the University of Hawaii already procured a 25-year, it's called an IRU agreement with the submarine cable owners, and they have two 100 gig circuits. Two 100 gig circuits that they've already sent us a letter saying for the entire time that it's connected to Guam, the University of Guam will have free access to it. We just need to worry about getting access from the University of Guam to where the cable landing station or the University of Hawaii equipment is at. So for us right now, the equipment that we can afford, we've already set up to be ready to connect to the University of Hawaii, California, and the rest of the U.S. at a 10 gig speed.
And how will this help the University of Guam in respect to funding sources?
Well, for example, we wouldn't have gotten the F-score grant, which is a $7 million grant and potential to grow to $20 million had we not had this connectivity. And so it's basically, you know, if you're talking about conducting in-depth research and monitoring data all the time, you have to have the IT infrastructure in order to do that. So it grows us, and for now it's at kind of minimal cost, but at some point in time it's going to cost us to try to make the connections just even to the cable landing station.
And then what about the possible fiber lines, the underwater lines? What is that about? The possible, in your chart you have different fibers running through different parts of the Pacific, and then you have the funded areas and then the possible areas. What does the possible fiber lines entail? What will be its function? Same thing?
So the international community that I've talked to, the members in Asia, the members in Australia, the members in America, are interested in establishing 6 100 gig submarine cable fiber optics for the research and education networking community on Guam. We've had 2 significant discussions already in the University of Hawaii about getting that commitment from the research and education networking community, from ARNet, from Singaren, from Internet 2, from the University of Hawaii, from CNIC in California, Pacific Northwest Gigapop in Washington. And so for now, the submarine cable fiber optic lines that are probably going to be ready for service between July and October of this year are the lines that the University of Hawaii purchased, the Southeast Asia U.S. submarine cable fibers. That is already going to be landing on the cable landing station. The rest of it are planned out, but there's also other lines that have been on Guam for a number of years. For example, Internet 2 already has the AAG submarine cable landing in Tangisan that just goes through Guam, unable to provide service to the University of Guam because it's too expensive for them to go out from Tangisan to the University of Guam. So that we had to forego that service since November of last year.
So the reason why I'm asking this also is to understand the commercial aspect use that UOG could possibly gain revenue from, because I believe in 2010, when the big tsunami hit Japan, we lost connectivity in some areas, at least in the military network, and also with some areas of Guam, because that's where some of our fiber lines were ran. So are you also looking to implement this as a commercial revenue source or anything like that?
Right now, we are looking at it within the research and education networking standpoint, and within the community, we make a difference between the commercial and the research and education networking side. Our focus right now is on the research and education networking side, and leave the commodity or commercial side separate from that because of the amount of bandwidth that we're looking to be able to sustain, and because we don't want to step on that realm of the commercial side of the house.
I see.
Yeah, along those lines, excuse me, I was trying to find my email message, but I can't find it right now. The military is planning to do some sophisticated things here as well.
Yes.
And we're in communication. I'm personally in communication with a company in Virginia that's bidding on some of this. And part of the spin-off on this is to develop IT technicians at the University of Guam to work on this. So having this capacity, really allows us to engage in something that would have been unthinkable.
Yes.
See, that's the issue.
And that's why I'm asking too, because perhaps this can also provide another economic opportunity for the island, so that we can be an IT industry hub, a data server hub. So thank you very much for all that you're doing. This is...
Well, I just wanted to add that when I talk to the commercial providers, I tell them that, look, from the university side, from the research and education networking side, our research is going to be creating the killer apps that's going to create that demand by the consumers. So a lot of consumers today, they have a 5 meg connection, 25, 50, But the research that we're doing is requiring 10 gigs or 100 gigs of applications. So the users now, when they see that they need more because their applications will work better, they're going to demand that from the commercial providers. And they're seeing that, and they're agreeing with us that that is a huge potential for them.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hidalgo, and the rest of the UOG community. I really appreciate all
Do you
the
have any of these as your professors?
Yes. I won't embarrass them.
I hope they treated you well.
It was the other way around.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Susan Malasi, President Underwood, and kudos to the faculty and staff, all the stakeholders of the University of Guam. Looking out into the audience today, President Underwood, you're supported by a lot of folks out here that are not unfamiliar faces in our community. We see them out doing things every day, so I just want to start by thanking you all for your service. You mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that this FY18 appropriation request would enable the University of Guam to provide accessible education, develop social and economic capacity in our communities, and create change and growth through research innovation. So my line of questioning is kind of in line with all of those points that you laid out. I think it's important now more than ever that we continue with research, and I'm particularly interested in economic research, health research, and research that will look into our efforts to reduce and mitigate the effects of climate change. We've seen the firsthand effects of climate change, whether it's local coral bleaching or flooding islands in Kiribati, or actually just the most recent Trump administration announcement that he's withdrawing from the Paris Accord. So my question to you is, are there any plans in this budget to expand current research efforts and plans at the various schools in the UOG, particularly in the Center for Island Sustainability?
Yes, actually, the Center for Island Sustainability is focused on trying to find ways to live sustainably on small island societies. And I know that there's a hearing on climate change legislation next week, which of course couldn't come at a more propitious time than today when President Trump has announced pulling out from Paris. But you know, other than that, I'm hoping, but of course we don't know what the funding environment is, that this may have consequences in terms of federal funding for various kinds of activities. So we may have to stop using the word, climate change and use something else, but hopefully still receive the same money and carry out the same purpose, which is to find a sustainable way for island societies to exist. Our EPSCOR funding is primarily focused on that, trying to find species of coral that are resilient to climate change and to temperature rise in seawater. So, and that has a dramatic effect on the chain of life down the road. So it's trying to figure out how to work this at and we're always involved in all of this. We're involved in trees. We're involved in the health of the forest, the health of our water supply, of our fresh water supply. So all of these things are kind of part and parcel of who we are as a university. There isn't any kind of activity that goes on this island where somebody from the outside wants to come in and do a development, or somebody from the outside wants to come in and do some kind of activity that they don't automatically make a stop at the University of Guam to consult with somebody. So it's not me. Most of the time I don't know, everything that's going on. Maybe I know 10% of what's going on, but, there's faculty and there's research units. This is such a vital, critical part. So, even we're trying to figure out how to do this, not just in economic research, social science research, which is the Center for Island Sustainability, was originally conceptualized to give rise to, and we've had our, I think we completed our 8th conference, and it's very successful, and we continue to hope to do more. we've encouraged debate and discussion about energy at levels that had never done before, and I think we've been able to, I don't want to credit the conference for this, but I think, I will credit the conference for this. We've been able to bat down some, I think, kind of odd proposals in the past for energy. So, we're happy to play that role, and our role is only going to increase as we face more challenges down the line.
Thank you. Just in overviewing your FY appropriations request, it was mentioned under the university's long-term investments, I think it's on page 3, that the university is considering eco and pedestrian-friendly items to include in the physical master plan, as well as a waste and recycling collection and transfer facility. This was of interest to me, so I wanted to ask if you could elaborate on a little bit more on that. Can a report or a study be submitted, and how can we model these efforts across other GovGuam entities?
What page is that on?
3, it's III.
On the budget submission?
Yes. In the introduction. On the attachment, overview of the University of Guam's FY18 appropriation requests. Also considered in the PMP is the reshaping of the university's landscape to reflect a more eco and pedestrian-friendly environment. Campus quad improvements, waste recycling collection and transfer facility.
Okay.
I'm not making it up, right?
Right, yeah, okay. I'm glad that we have able assistants. Yeah, well, obviously trying to enhance our own sustainability practices is part of it. We're also, this is maybe a little bit controversial to some, but we have to continue to explore the idea of waste to energy. And we engage in a project with Okayama University in Japan, where they analyze our waste stream. It's just, the waste stream on Guam is different than in other places, and we just have to address that issue. We just can't continue to avoid it, because otherwise we're going to become, we're going to drown in our own waste. So it's like part of the economic and social calculation of, what kind of life do we want to lead? How do we relate to our own waste, and how we relate to our own energy, and how are we going to utilize that in a way that makes sense and is sustainable?
I'm going to shift to workforce development. You talked a little bit about college access and the realities of having only a high school diploma and what that would lead to in terms of job and career opportunities. As the chairwoman of workforce development, I'm concerned that our island loses very talented people who are seeking more opportunities elsewhere. Can you expand on the role that UOG is playing in workforce development in Guam and in the region?
Well, I think it plays a vitally important role. I think, as I mentioned before, the professional middle class on Guam and in the surrounding region primarily comes from the University of Guam. It's a different world. I mean, you're all younger than me, so I can say this.
Slightly.
Right. It's a different world, The high school graduates, when they're going to change their job 20 times, 23 times in the course of their lives. So how is it possible to prepare them for that? It's not really possible. So you have to give that kind of talent, skills and perspectives and capabilities that help them be able to engage that. But they can't engage that with a high school diploma. So what happens? What happens to our people is you end up having, you're engaged in kind of jobs that are not really going to contribute to the growth of the economy. So then we have to, in turn, figure out how are we going to develop an economy that's not just based on tourism and military spending. What is that knowledge economy that we need? We need a knowledge economy, an economy that is based on intellectual inquiry and technical skills that will encourage some entrepreneurs. Now, there's entrepreneurs out there. There's young entrepreneurs, I've been told, that are in their 20s and 30s that are doing startup companies on island. So, you know, I tell people this. I said, you know, young people are graduating today are not aspiring to work for the government of Guam. They're not aspiring to work for the corporate world. They're aspiring to be their own boss. Right. And we want to be able to give them, to kind of empower them through, you know, skills about how to start up a business, but at the same time also connect them to people who have an idea based on some form of intellectual inquiry. Could be in biology, could be in chemistry, or it could be some unmet social need that a social work major may develop, and to try to kind of match that up to create that new economy. Because if we're just going to continue to rely on military spending and tourism as our base, we're not going to be sustainable. That's really the bottom line.
You mentioned the knowledge economy and IT. So I wanted to ask, UOG is home to our computer center. Can you talk a little bit more, and I think Mr. Hidalgo was up earlier, about resources and digital infrastructure at UOG, what investments you hope to make, but also is there any collaboration with the Office of Technology in the government of Guam?
Well, I think there's a fair amount. I think, you know, Ramel has those connections. But, you know, the important piece on that, too, for us is to upgrade our own computer science program. And so we're refashioning that program. And we're also kind of refashioning a CIS, Computer Information Systems program, to kind of be at least consistent with current practice.
I've met with Frank a couple of times, but we have not talked in detail about the things that we're doing at the Office of Information Technology at the university. I think that's something that we have to schedule, but he is aware of, like, for example, the Guam Open Research and Education Exchange and what kinds of opportunities that makes available to the university as well as the rest of the island of Guam. Right. I have engaged with GCC as well as the Department of Education on the technologies that we're trying to implement, more specifically the Guam Open Research and Education Exchange, and how the three of us can collaborate and you know, increase the network connectivities for all three of our organizations.
Thank you. We were recently at the University of Guam for Congresswoman Radowagon's speech, and it's exciting that we now have a Triton Congress. I've heard of the Regional Policy Center. Can you expand on the research services in policy and governance that the university offers to our community?
Well, that's an opportunity that was primarily the brainchild of Dr. John Rivera. So, you know, what he's opening up is the possibility of doing public policy analysis, and you know, we're hopeful that people will take us up on it, and you know, he'll apply the class, his personal knowledge as well as the knowledge of other professors, and also utilize students in the process. You know, sometimes. Again, those are opportunities that people should see as possible at the university, but they're not cost-free. You know, they cost something. We've had, you know, a couple of experiences in the past where a professor did a study for a government of Guam agency and never got paid, which is not cool. But I don't think that'll happen again.
So you did say we want to try to move beyond tourism and beyond military industries, but I did want to touch a little bit on tourism, and I wanted to ask you how we can build a more robust tourism program at the university that explores every facet of tourism.
Well, you know, the current structure of the Bachelor's Business Administration actually places people into the tourism industry, even though it's not called that directly. We do have an international tourism strand, but you know, the HR strand, the finance strand, a lot of these individuals end up in tourism. Of course, the issue is always, again, do you prepare a program for a specific occupation, you know, a baccalaureate program for a specific occupation, or do you prepare on something like this for something where there's more general applicability for the individual?
And just wrapping up, you mentioned ESL training for Asian students earlier, and I just wanted to ask, where are these students, where are they housed? At the dorms at UOG?
No, they're not. See, that's why we want the flexibility to enter into a public-private partnership so we can recoup more of that cost. Currently, they're, Carlos Taitano, who manages that, they're housed all over the island.
So none of them are housed at the dorms?
No.
Okay. I did want to ask about the dorms. UOG dorms allow for a rich cross-cultural experience to residents of Guam and the students from our neighboring islands. So I wanted to ask about if there's anything in the budget that really helps to improve the services offered at the dorms. I think some of them are in pretty rough shape. So I wanted to ask if there's any...
No, well, the dorms have undergone a transformation this past year. We hired a resident director. So they've undergone we have a store, we have all kinds of upgrades that are going on. But, these dorms were built in the late 60s, so there's only so much you can do.
Right.
So the issue is that we have space for about 190. We want to be able to grow that.
Expand it,
and we can't, we're not going to ask the government of Guam to fund the building of a dorm, but we can get the dorm residents to fund it if we get the flexibility to be allowed to enter into more than a 5-year agreement with public-private partnership to build those, dorms that could bring in another 300 students. That's what we're asking. That's all the university's ever asked for, is just give us the opportunity to do that.
Okay. Thank you again, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. President, for the presentation. I want to thank you also for sending your athletic director and your associate director of Island Sustainability. We got I think it was very strategic in your part in allowing us to talk about sports and the Southern Development Master Plan. The government allowed the university, or authorized the university, to use $1 million in tax credit for the purpose of constructing or developing a multi-purpose sports complex. I'd like to know how much of that has been used, or is there plans in the works to move forward with using that tax credit up to $1 million?
The money that we recoup for that is insufficient to really do much in the sports facility outside of the Calvo Fieldhouse. So we're kind of either trying to build it up or scale back our plans a little bit. We were hoping that we could engage in a cooperative plan with GDOE, where the area between GW and UOG is seen as one integrated whole. Because, you could build a baseball stadium in one and a football stadium in the other, but instead of building both a baseball and a football facility in both areas. So we're still in that conversation. But the funding is not robust enough to do anything than just prepare the field. Although we've refurbished the tennis courts.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you're still working with the capital fund that was developed not only for that purpose, but other purposes.
Well, I hope there's a lockbox on that fund.
Okay.
I hope nobody has the key to that.
Moving on with I know we talked a little bit with regards to the computer science program, and you mentioned that it's going through a revamp or restructuring of its curriculum to align itself, at least we talked about in our last budget go around about how that could align with public sector, or growing our public sector IT workforce. We have the Office of Technology. I thank your CIO for being at the meeting where the OTEC, or the CTO, put before us a roadmap going forward and how they would have to modernize even the staffing patterns of the government of Guam with regards to IT. So, and that has been put before this government, and I believe adopted by the CTO. I hope that the university can look at that staffing pattern and see how it can align the programs to these types of needed IT specialists that can help the government in Guam. So that's there and it's ready. I know CIO was at that meeting when we discussed it. And as you go through this process of looking at the curriculum for the IT program at UOG, that could be factored in so that those who are graduating out of that program will have looked at these areas for possible opportunities. So
We'll do so. We'll do so, Senator.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, this has been a great discussion. To tell you the truth, I was going to stay for an hour until the basketball game started, and then I was going to book out of here. But this is definitely more interesting. And I think that from all the questions, you could probably gather that there's a lot of support for the University of Guam and the mission that you have. That we all understand the challenges and maybe of not just the daily operations, but even in just trying to fulfill your goal of going from good to great. And we all understand that. I don't mean to be the damper on this conversation, but I think I need to at least say it. First of all, I appreciate the conversation that was initiated by the speaker, the chairman, on the various points of concern that he had. And of course, one is that the legislature has always been very supportive of the University of Guam. And if there is a shortage of funds, it's not because of what we have not appropriated. It basically is what has not been given. And again, that's not within our jurisdiction to do that. We can appropriate, and then the other branch of government basically allots. And so I hope you do take that point very seriously, that discussion in terms of any shortages doesn't belong with us. It really belongs with the other branch. However, and with that being said, with all the good things that we can foresee coming out of the University of Guam,
Yes. Go ahead. Ask the question, and then I'll have to take a little break to come up with an answer.
actually, no. In fact, I will make this fast because I don't have a question. But I do have perhaps something of importance to this whole public hearing today. And that is that would you like to take a break? I mean, I don't mind if we take a 1 minute break.
Sure.
Let's, Mr. Chairman, if we may.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I understand. I fully understand.
Thank
Let's
you.
resume this.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Speaker and Senator Espo.
Mr. President, it's good to see you smiling again.
I'm ready for anything now. My mind is clear.
I think it's more than the mind that's clear. But, Mr. President, actually, to continue the message that I was going down, again, with all the support that you're getting from this body, and on all the plans that you have on the plate, again, and the mission of going from good to great, I think we all can buy in. And I guess the message that I really want to at least relay right here, right now, is that this committee, this chairman, is going to have a very difficult time during this budget cycle. And I know that the request that the University of Guam has put out is basically for a 10% increase of approximately $3 million, a little bit over $3 million. And it seems reasonable. But in the past several budget cycles, the chairman had actually reduced what the projected revenues were that came out of ADLU. And they reduced drastically. And we still haven't met those projections, even after the reduced amount. And the difficulty in this budget cycle is really more pronounced, I think, than in previous years, because even though we did make some very real and drastic reductions in the projection revenues of the past 2 or 3 years, this year is probably a little more precarious. And the reason why is, first of all, we have, well, right off the bat, I think economically we're definitely going to see a hit just because of the H2 issue in terms of the construction revenue, that should have been generated but has not been generated and has not gone into our coffers. I think that whole discussion on the capping of Section 30 to pay for war reparations and capping it at 68, we're already seeing a $10 million difference in what this fiscal year's budget is going to show. On top of it, we're really unsure of what the federal policies, the tax policies and grant policies are going to be, and what kind of hit we're going to take on this island, maybe from reduced grants, reduced federal funding, whatever it may be. And then on top of it, and again, back in my mind, this is a real concern, with all the potential military saber rattling that's going on because of North Korea, if there is even a small, some kind of small incident that happens out of all that, the tourism industry on this island, we have seen in the past, right, will definitely drop. And so in total, I don't mean to paint such a dire picture, but it's, I think, something that we have to at least be very wary of, that we may not see the revenues coming in the next fiscal year that we're hoping to see. And I say this not just to address University of Guam, but I think all agencies. All agencies, I believe, are going to come in here and ask for an increase. We've seen already several agencies. It's exactly what they've done. They need an increase for this and an increase for that, and they're probably justifiable. Much like yours, the increase that you seek is justified. But again, I think just to put a little bit of reality into this discussion is that this committee on appropriations who's working on the budget is going to be hard-pressed to try to really meet the requirements and the requests of all the various agencies and entities that come before us. And not to say that it's not possible for University of Guam to see what you're requesting, that 10% increase, but that just means perhaps taking a look at where we're going to decrease from somebody else, from some other agency. And so I say that with a heavy heart, because again, we'd love to give it. I think everybody up here supports the mission of the University of Guam and all the great things you do and all the challenges that we know you have before you. But I think the reality is when we're talking budget and we're talking dollars and cents and really what is really coming into the government and what could potentially perhaps be seen as a decrease in the months to come, I think gives us pause to perhaps be a little conservative, or we should be, not a little, but more conservative than we already have been. And I'm sorry I have to say it, but I think it's part of a very fair discussion to be able to say and bring us back to a certain point of reality. And again, not to diminish anything that the university is striving to do and accomplish, but again, this might be one of those years where an increase to anybody may not be possible. But I just needed to say that, Mr. President.
Well, thank you, Senator Espaldon, for that dose of reality. I think we've already experienced that reality in the past fiscal year. And so the question here is, of course, I don't envy the task that you and your colleagues have in terms of making these decisions and confronting the realities of funding or attack by North Korea or federal cuts by President Trump. Well, I don't know what those things are. But here's what I would caution, is that the concept of shared sacrifice, not selective sacrifice. That's what the university has experienced this past year. It's selective sacrifice. If there had been, the sacrifice had been generally applied to everybody who who gets funding from the government of Guam, then okay, I get that. I'm in favor of that. I understand that. I understand shared sacrifice. But selective sacrifice, where only the educational agencies were the ones that at the end of the day that were shortchanged, that's not shared sacrifice. So, you have a difficult challenge ahead of you, and I appreciate that, and that's why I'm never running for senator. But on the other hand, I think most of us understand the notion of shared sacrifice. If everybody had been in on it, then fine. If everybody had said, okay, we're cutting everybody by the same amount, or we're forcing everybody to, but there was never any guidance given like that. And so that's we don't know what the future holds for us, but I perfectly understand that, and I perfectly understand the dilemma that you face.
And I appreciate your comment on the shared sacrifice, because you're right, it has to be across the board, and I'm just sorry that it is seen to be selective in this case. But this is, again, I think where the chairman has encouraged you and has basically stated that you need to make that argument a lot louder and a lot clearer to those who need to hear it. And perhaps not just by yourself, but you have a whole contingent, a whole army up there at UOG that you can appeal to and mobilize. And I think it would definitely behoove the University of Guam to go down that road. But thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that given the last statements about certain realities and your ability to make it work, Mr. President, I'm not going to discount or dismiss those financial realities. So I'm going to look at the glass half full. I want to commend you. What I do know is the university has engendered this spirit of entrepreneurism. You've been very entrepreneurial. You're embracing a very aggressive technology agenda that may reap financial dividends at the end of the day. You've also managed to be flexible in looking not at what's happening as a result of the Trump administration and condemning that, but accepting the reality that perhaps the way around it is to adopt a new lexicon, evolving from climate change terminology to embracing things like being able to withstand those kind of disasters, whether it's man-made or natural, to be resilient. And I appreciate that. I just wanted to put those points into the record that while we're operating in a context that's very challenging, that I want to herald those behind you and beside you for making it work and finding new opportunities and new monies. I have no questions for you, but I do want to commend your staff for coming out, Dr. Liangro, for having addressed some of my concerns early on. But I do want to put that into the record, and thank you for thinking out of the box.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, could I just ask you a couple more questions? And please bear with me. It's my first term as a senator, and these finances, I just want to make sure I totally understand about the tuition, because that's the number one question that we get, I guess. And you have threatened to raise the tuition if you don't get the funding that's been requested or the allotments that have already been appropriated. And so on your basic compact, the 50-50, where it says Gov Guam supports 50% of the costs per FTE student and tuition supports 50%. I just want to know, so on the cost per FTE student, $10,700, what's the trend been over the last 3 to 5 years? I mean, does this increase every year, this cost per FTE student?
Yeah, sorry. It's been pretty stable as of the last, actually it goes back to the early 2000s, that it's always been around 50. It's been creeping a little bit over 50 the past few years.
No, I mean the cost at $10,700.
Oh, that's been pretty stable also.
Has it? Okay. And so is this how is this calculated? Is this overall budget divided by enrollment, or? Okay, so yeah, could you explain that?
It's the instructional faculty. It's the instructional faculty. Not all faculty are instructional, and so this is calculated on the basis of how the instruction that's delivered and received.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that because you have in another chart shown your increase in revenues that you have by your own, as you said, the entrepreneurial spirit and just the efforts of your researchers and your faculty. But so the increase in revenues don't necessarily correlate directly financial impact to the students. Other impacts I understand that they have research available at the university, opportunity available for them, but financially that doesn't go into that formula. That's correct?
The instructional cost is calculated just on the receipt of instruction. So, but it's also important to remember that in the research projects, in the 897 employees, a lot of those are students that are themselves involved in research that they never would have had the opportunity. Right. So, you know, you could tell a long story about how, these research projects worked on by these students. 5 years from now, we don't know what ideas these students are going to come up with based on the fact that they had these research opportunities at the University of Guam, which were spawned as a result of the research and service programs.
I totally understand that. What about if the tuition for UOG is low compared to the rest of the nation? What about this 50-50? Is that common in other areas of other universities?
I think that's pretty much common, and that's a goal that a lot of institutions have. But I don't think they've ever a lot of institutions don't want to get advertise it that way, but I like to explain it that way because it's easy. I came up with this 50-50 idea a few years ago just to explain to people at the university, internally as well as externally, what we're all about and what our relationship is to students and to costs. And then, we also, at the same time, we try to mitigate the actual impact on the individual student by increasing financial aid. So some of the research projects bring with it financial aid, so the actual out-of-pocket expense to students is minimized.
All right. So, okay. I think that answers my question. I'm just curious right now. I expect Gov Guam must be putting in. I mean, is it true Gov Guam puts in more, this 50% of the cost, than other states, or is that not correct?
No, I really. I think that what has happened in other states is that if you look at it after the 2008 crisis, is that other states just dropped their support to the institutions, and it forced the institutions to raise their like UH had 100% increase in tuition, and so it just exponentially. And we tried to mitigate that locally because we wanted to keep this 50-50 ratio.
Yes. No, I understand, and I appreciate the mitigation for the students, yes, and that's what I wanted to confirm to make sure, because that, I think, is one of the most common questions
That's
that
right.
we get in our offices.
That and
is,
the
yeah.
price of textbooks.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Let's leave it on that positive note offline. I will give you my negative note. And thank you very much, and
Thank you. It's just my
for all that all of you do. But really seriously, this
I get the word.
Yes.
I got the word, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for allowing me to take a break.
Thank you. This committee will stand in recess until Monday at June the 5th at 3:30 when we meet with the Guam Community College.